welcome to another episode of We're Not Wizards. My name's Richard. I'll be your host for September, because we're not doing the days of the week, and me telling the reason why we're not doing the days of the week and just becoming the months is just like a bit more of a not joke that doesn't really need to happen anymore, so we're not going to do it anymore. Anyway, that is beside the point. Tonight is a quick start on the Kickstarter show. And what we do on a quick start on the Kickstarter show is there will be somebody out there who is kickstarting their Kickstarter project. And we've asked them to come on the show to tell us all about it. And they have said yes. And the person that we've asked was Marc Specter. And Marc Specter is from the Grand Gamers Guild, which I am intrigued to find out what that is all about. Marc Specter is currently looking for funding on the Artemis Project, which has not only looked for funding, it's found funding, it's taken quite a little bit of extra funding on top of its funding. So he is here tonight to tell us a little bit about himself, to tell us a little bit about the game, and to tell us a little bit about where he kind of fits into the hobby. So hello there, Marc.
Hello, thank you for having me.
No, thank you for coming along. Delighted to have you join us and tell us a little bit about the Artemis Project itself. For everybody else who's out there who's maybe listening for the first time, thank you for joining us and listening along. The reason that we do this is quite simple. We do it for you guys. We've passed our 200 episodes. We spent those 200 episodes doing it for us. It's about time we turned that around and we started doing stuff for you guys instead. And the second reason that we did this was because I put a little bit of a shout out on the Facebookings, and somebody says, oh, you might want to speak to Marc about his project. And I went, okay. So we started a dialogue, and here we are. So are you well, sir?
Oh yeah, I'm fantastic. I've had a good day. The project is having a strong day. We just broke through a benchmark stretch goal, revealed some good stuff, and we got 10 days left to make some amazing things happen.
That's excellent. So mood in camp at the moment is kind of upbeat and happy and kind of smiles all around it.
Absolutely. And believe me, for anyone who's run a Kickstarter, you know that not every day is like that. In fact, there are many days when you question your existence and why you chose to undertake this crazy thing. But you do it anyway.
So Let's talk a little bit about existence, and let's talk a little bit about your existence in the hobby. One of the things we like to do in the show is we like to have a little bit of a look back in the past before we have an eye on the present, and we look off into the spectre of the future. I don't know why I did that. But do you want to tell us a little bit about how you got involved, kind of like in the hobby yourself? A little bit about your history.
So, I've been on a few podcasts, and a lot of them ask this question. And the funny thing is, the more often I ask this question, the more I realize that my history as a gamer kind of goes back pretty far. So, way back when I was but a wee lad growing up, my mom and I used to play games. Two games in particular. One was called Greed, and the other was called Monster Mansion. And, they were fantastic in my memory, but I'm sure they were really, really terrible games, is my guess. I've never gone back and checked. So
we need to,
you
need to check this.
Well, I tell you what, if I ever get exposure to a copy of one of those games, because I wouldn't even begin to know where to find them, I will absolutely sit down and play them, and then we can have a part 2 to this interview and see how they hold up after 35 years.
You could do a video review or something like that. That could be your success. That could be your successful thing at the end of the funding. You have got 10 days to find a copy of Monster Mansion and review it for your own video. It could be a late stretch goal. The possibilities are endless, Marc.
I bet someone out there on the internet has it. I mean, someone has everything. Whether they would be willing to part with those precious gems is a totally different story. But but I'm in no hurry anyway.
So you're playing games with your mom.
Yeah, and then I do remember that around my early teenage years, I started picking up Dungeons & Dragons, like many people in the hobby. It was around the time of 2nd edition Dungeons & Dragons. And of course, I grew up on the cartoon that, had the kids who got lost in the roller coaster and went and did adventures with the Dungeon Master and Venger and all that fun stuff. So D&D always represented a world that was super intriguing to me, but that until I was about, I don't know, 13, 14, something like that, I had never actually, indulged in. But I had a friend who was really into it and who was my game master or dungeon master, as the case may be, and did that for a couple years. Then when I went to college, everything kind of stopped. It really, like everything, pleasure reading, pleasure television, pleasure gaming, whether it be...
Really?
I was a very studious person, and I don't want to say there was no time for fun, because I really had a lot of fun doing the things I did. I loved being a hall president. I loved being a peer minister. I loved being busy. I loved what I was studying, which at the time was psychology and religion. So I was having a good time. It just was a completely different type of good time. And then when I got out of college, I actually, I got married almost immediately out of college and didn't really pick up gaming again until 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons. And that happened as a result of being a mystery shopper, actually, because, and this is kind of a weird story, but
I want to hear this.
So, a lot of people wonder what in the world mystery shopping is, but it's when you go into a store, you evaluate their service, and then you essentially get paid for it, either in product or in money or both. And way back in the mid-2000s, there were these stores, at least in the United States, that were called Wizards of the Coast stores. And so once a month, I would go into those stores, and I would have to present the associate with a scenario, get a recommendation, and then either purchase that recommendation or something else. And it was under that disguise, that subterfuge, that I actually amassed a tremendous library of TSR. I don't know if it was TSR at that point, but basically 3rd edition Dungeons & Dragons books, as well as all of the knockoff books that came under the open license that was available. And then eventually, when I ran out of books, I came to the store to do my shop, and I ended up asking about a board game and ended up walking out with Catan. And then it was just, it was amazing. It was a transcendent experience. And after that came Origins. And anyway, here we are today. So there was like a much bigger answer to a question than you probably thought you were going to get.
What, when you were back at college and you were majoring in psychology and religion, did you have a career path kind of carved out for yourself then? Were you?
Yes.
I mean, because you said, listen, because most people say, well, I went to college and that's when the fun started, and you said, well, I went to college and I got really kind of studious. So, I mean, what was your kind of career path at the time, or what were you thinking about doing, or what were you planning on doing at the time?
At the time, I had every intention of being a psychologist, and I toyed between clinical psychology, and then I actually got involved with a professor who did a lot of research on procrastination, and I actually ran a study on procrastination for him, but nothing much ever really came of it.
Did you spend too much time kind of thinking about starting the study, or?
No, it just, basically, gosh, it's really hard to tell, but there were a lot of circumstances that didn't bring it to fruition. Partly on me, partly on him. And if I tried to reconstruct it, I'd probably be telling tales out of school. But there was one minor component of the study that had to do with time orientation and procrastination that actually did eventually get published. There was one of those personality surveys that people took and determined whether they were past-oriented, present-oriented, or future-oriented, as determined by the actual survey. And, somewhere out there you can look, and I think basically the conclusion is that in terms of sort of a mental or emotional orientation, procrastinators spend a lot of time thinking about the past as opposed to the future. What other conclusions or work has, you could draw on that? I don't know that it ever went any further. But, that was my college years. And then when I got out of college, I basically decided that I was kind of done going to school, at least for a while. And I really didn't want to pursue any more education. And my wife, or my girlfriend / fiance, who is now my wife, actually, so we graduated simultaneously, but she actually had to complete some college work and got an internship with the European Parliament. So at that point, we actually moved to Belgium.
All right, okay.
Yeah, it was an amazing time. We moved to Belgium, lived there for 4.5 months. Sadly, at that time, I was into neither games nor beer, so it was a huge opportunity missed. But I did watch.
You could have been going to Essen.
I know, seriously. And now that you say that, I never made the connection, but I was there during Essen. I was there in the fall of 1998 through very early 1999. So we were absolutely there when Essen was going on, and I had no idea whatsoever.
Could you just give yourself a little bit of a shake for not doing that, if you don't mind? Just
yeah, I'll do that. I'll smack myself around.
No, I'm not asking. No, not smacking. Maybe a gentle flick on the end of the nose, or
okay.
Paper cut at the very, very worst. I mean, nothing worse than that.
But you're right. Had I sort of been into the things then that I am now, it definitely would have put me perhaps on this path much, much earlier. That's an interesting observation.
But then it might not have put you on the path at all, because it might have been the case that you might have gone to Essen and went, oh my goodness, look at all this, and it might have been too much. You find your path at the time. I mean, I know a lot of people who getting into the hobby just now, where it is just now, might not be the best thing for them, because it's very overwhelming at the moment. There's a hell of a lot going on at the moment as well.
It is daunting. Every time you turn around, you bang into another publishing company, and I'm one of them.
Exactly.
So,
so did you? I mean, did you get into psychology then, or did you need more did you need to go and get kind of more education to become, or did you go on and become like a full kind of psychologist?
No, not at all. In the United States, at least, and I know your listener base is probably somewhat international, you really can't do anything with merely a bachelor's degree in psychology. So I would have had to go for a master's and or a PhD, and that just wasn't the path. So actually what happened is I ended up coming back to the United States after our brief time in Belgium and being a salesperson for an insurance company, which is what I did for 18 years before I decided I'd had enough.
Wow. But then you do what you do. And I know a lot of people that kind of have these plans and then they wake up the next day and they say, oh, I've done 10 years doing that. I mean, I did about 8 years in retail myself. Yeah,
well, at the time, I really liked insurance. I liked what the company stood for. I get how insurance functions in society. I was selling a product that I believed in. But after 18 years, I changed. The company changed. The political and financial environment changed. And I stayed on for probably 2 years longer. Not 2 years longer, but 2 years of sincere unhappiness waiting to turn a corner, because you spend 18 years doing something, you're going to have ups and downs. It's not as if every day you walk in and it's a bed of roses. Everything has its challenges. So I spent 2 years trying to turn a corner, waiting to get that enthusiasm that I'd had for 16 years running, and I just couldn't take it anymore. I was a very, very unhappy person, and I was tired of being unhappy. So I turned in my resignation and called it done.
I mean, sometimes you got to do that. I mean, I know of a lot of people that it's better the devil you know. You stay in the same place because the actual fear, you're the established guy. You know what I mean? You're kind of like, everybody knows you. All your customers like you. You've got a massive network. You're a well-known name, and then to go into a similar place, it's daunting, and you become the new boy, whether you've been doing it for 5 years or whether you've been doing it for kind of like 15 years. I mean, during the time, the insurance time, were you kind of keeping up with the hobby at that time? Was it something that you kind of touched on kind of now and again, or were you? I mean, you mentioned obviously picking up Catan, so I'm guessing was the board game collection kind of amassing as you were amassing kind of premiums from clients, basically?
So the board gaming came a little bit later. When I first started the insurance career, I was still very much into the role-playing and the Dungeons & Dragons. And what's funny is that I was a dungeon master, so I ran the game for 8 years for a group of people. And I would use my lunch hour to work on my campaign. And I had a big map that was, 3 sheets of paper by 3 sheets of paper. and I hung it on my cubicle wall, sort of not only as inspiration and something to think about when my mind wasn't busy doing other things, but so that when lunchtime came, I could pull it down and work on it.
Mm-hmm.
And my boss at the time actually asked me, she pulled me into a meeting, basically to say, hey, I see you have this weird thing on your wall. I just need to know that you're actually working at work and not working on, whatever that is, because she had no idea what it was. And I assured her very much so that I was doing my job, that I was being paid to do, and that I only had that there for, like I said, for inspiration and to muck about on my break.
When you were DM, were you running kind of different campaigns, or were you running kind of like campaigns that kind of mingled into each other? Did you have a big dream, or were you kind of guy that says, right, let's finish, scrap our characters and start again? What kind of GM were you?
No, this was one. Actually, it was 2 mega campaigns. So the first one that lasted about 4 years was actually based on a third-party supplement. The name is escaping me now, but they had this this group of baddies that were referred to as the Carnival Crew. And so basically my story was that I had the Carnival Crew traveling around the land, basically recruiting children or kidnapping children for sacrifice. And eventually what happened, and the way that scenario ended, was the group met with the Carnival Crew, or met the Carnival King in this swamp area, and one of them cast some sort of a vortex spell, and that was sort of the big finale. It was amazing. The actual battle took about 3 hours. It was exhausting emotionally and physically. It was super late at night, and what actually happened this is what happened. It wasn't a spell. They actually got a knife that could cut through the fabric of reality, and they opened a vortex, and the big bad guy got sucked into the vortex, and then they escaped the swamp area, but that became a permanent landmark where, nothing could live, because if it got too close, it got sucked into the vortex. And then we basically had an entire campaign changeover, and I can't quite remember the campaign we moved on to, but all the characters and all the people who still wanted to play carried over, and I basically ran another campaign for those folks with their characters for another 3 to 4 years.
Is it difficult to relinquish the reins to somebody else? I mean, once you're a GM, are you always kind of like a GM? Are you always like, are you always the guy that wants to be doing the creating, doing the controlling kind of thing? Did you ever sit back and let somebody else kind of, I guess, lead you down the kind of the merry path?
I did. Believe me, it is being a good GM, and I don't consider myself a particularly good GM, but I have had some of my players tell me, hey, I played D&D again, and man, you're a much better GM than my guy, but it's the only fix I can get. So, hey, I take it. But it is exhausting. And I wouldn't say many times, but I don't know, once every quarter maybe, one of the players would step up and say, hey, I'd like to give this a shot. And I would say to them, hey, go to town. I would love to take a break. So, and basically I would kind of tell them, it's kind of like when you're watching a sitcom, and you know that there's an overarching story, but you have these filler episodes because they have to get to, at least in the United States, I know you guys over in the UK, your television seasons, at least when I was there way back when, they tell a story and they tell it in as many parts as it needs to be told, and they don't fill it with a bunch of garbage. And I have a lot of respect for that it's not literally not commercially driven, because it means that a story can be told well and exist for its own sake, not for the financing that's behind it. So anyway, what I would do is I would allow them, I'd say, here's where I am, here's where I need to get to. So as long as you don't change that, we can do a little side quest, or we can do something that, you find to be unique and intriguing. And so they would plug in and I would roll with it and we would all be happy.
Is that where the name came from? Because to me, the Grand Gamer Guild or Gamers Guild sounds like a collection of kind of, I guess, gamers, guys that kind of, as a guild as opposed to kind of like
Sure.
a company. I mean, when did you come up with the name? Is that always, again, is that something that was kind of sitting in the background that you came up with? Was that linked to the kind of the role playing side of what you've been up to?
Actually, no. What it's really linked to is more than anything, was my time in Belgium. So the grand part has to do with the fact that I live in Grand Rapids, and that I like alliteration. So the gamers part is obvious, but it's the guild part that really speaks to the story I'm trying to create, for lack of a better way to put it. And what I mean by that is, so like many European cities, we lived in Brussels, which is the capital of Belgium, and in the center of the city there was an area called the Grand Place, which is this large plaza filled with, actually it's like a large market square, and the surrounding area is all these old guild houses. And just having lived there and enjoyed the heck out of my time there, the guild houses, to me, aside from being absolutely fantastic in and of themselves, they kind of represent the idea of a membership, and the idea of that once you get behind those doors, you are privy to information and stories and secrets and tricks of the trade that other people are not privy to. And so I guess in some ways, I mean, okay, so let me, and some of this, let's call this retconning, but now I see, when I say this out loud, I can see more of a connection to Dungeons and Dragons in the sense that, there are a lot of source books that have to do with, guild membership and things that you get by being member of the Thieves Guild and other story-driven guilds. But anyway, point being that I like the idea, it's very difficult to sell a company. People really don't buy a company in this industry. They buy games. And then if the next game you produce they don't care for, they move on. I totally get that. So, and that's okay. It is what it is. But I like the idea of hopefully cultivating an audience such that they're excited about following my company. And the idea being that they have this sense of recognition and membership and belonging to something and having access to something that is, hopefully to them special and out of the ordinary and, just a great thing to be a part of. And so that's really where the genesis of the name is. And the emotion and the vibe that I'm trying to cultivate among my fans.
Because you've got your Kickstarter bio mentions the Grand Gaming Academy.
Yeah, I know. That was not my smartest naming decision, in that I named my company very confusingly after or not after my demo team, but sort of parallel to my demo team. So one of the ways that I got involved in the industry is before I was publishing, but after I had been attending Origins for a few years. I never can be just an attendee. I always like to, give back a little bit more than that. And I started volunteering for the convention itself, and then I started volunteering to be a GM, and then eventually I put together a team of GMs who wanted to go to conventions and teach people how to play games. And so that's what the Grand Gaming Academy is. We attend Origins and we attend Gen Con annually, and essentially we ally with companies, my own included, to teach the games there, so that, for a bunch of reasons. One, because we like to teach. Two, because there's a lot of games out there, and a lot of folks won't buy a game unless they've had a chance to play it and know if they're going to love it. Yeah. And I hold my GMs to a pretty high standard. We get together and we literally practice playing the games and teaching them on a monthly basis, so that we can do a proper presentation for the publishers that trust us with their product. They're giving us product to take to the floor. That product costs them money, both because they give us the games, but also because of the shipping to get it to us.
Yeah.
And then we're unofficially part of their sales team out on the convention floor. If we don't provide a bang up experience, now we can't help the game itself, right? I mean, some games people are going to like, some games people aren't going to like. Some games are amazing, like Terraforming Mars, and we ally with Stronghold Games. And I tell you what, we could run Terraforming Mars all day long, and every game would fill up. And some games that I'll allow to remain nameless just don't resonate. And you could pick a million different reasons why they don't resonate. But you just can't get butts in seats sometimes. But it's our job to prepare them and be ready to run them. And again, be that unofficial part of the sales team so that hopefully if we can get the butts in the seats, we can do a good job and that person gets up and goes, man, that was awesome. And now I know how to play. And now I can go buy it and bring it home to my family and teach them how to play. So that's the mission of the Grand Gaming Academy.
Yeah, because there's only one. I mean, there's one company that I've seen kind of almost have kind of like people that do that in a professional manner, which is your Asmodee demo teams that used to be part of Endeavour Games. Endeavour were bought by Asmodee. It's a UK company, and they used to have teams that you'd find them at most kind of expos and events that they would have the latest kind of Asmodee kind of picking on the table that people could then go along and they'd be demonstrating and kind of showing kind of how to play. That sounds like something that you had going. You got a strong team, but what turns you away from kind of the GMing to doing the demoing to actually sitting down with a piece of white paper in front of you and saying, kind of let's put something together, because the Artemis Project isn't your first game. It's your third now, because you had your first one 2016 Unreal Estate.
Yeah.
And then you followed that up with Pocket Ops.
Correct. And actually, so you're missing a tiny bit of the timeline, but that's not a problem. Let me fill in a gap for you. So we did kickstart Unreal Estate, just like you said, but then feeling that I'd done pretty well and perspective being everything, I actually published a game called Stroop in the traditional way without Kickstarter, alongside Unreal Estate. And Stroop is a fantastic little game that has to do with the Stroop effect, which is that mental color confusion thing. I won't go into it too much because it doesn't explain well unless you see it, but it's a fantastic speed game. And then we actually had a part in Endeavour Age of Sail, which was co-published with my friend Helena Capel at Burnt Island Games. And we'll be releasing that after backers are fulfilled at Essen in just about a month. So what were you doing with what was your involvement in Endeavour? Co-publisher.
Really? I played that on Friday.
Oh, so the actual new edition?
I played the new edition on Friday, yeah.
Oh, well, tell me, what did you think?
I think it was it's extremely elegant in terms of the mechanics and how easy it is to pick up and play. That it's one of these interesting games that you start off and you say, okay, so I'm picking my building. Okay, let's pick your building, and then you're getting your men back, and then you're getting more men. You're getting your men back, and then you're taking your actions, and based on your counters and based where your place. So it's like a mini kind of worker placement game, and then by round 5, the analysis paralysis sets in, something so awful that I think we went from maybe spending about 2 hours, 2 minutes per turn, to having everybody sitting there for about 10 minutes, kind of thinking, really? Do I go here? Do I go in the shipping, or do I take over this lane, or do I do this, or do I take over this part and do I get my my little blue counter with a free action? There was a lot of positivity for the game. I think it was one of these games that crept up on you in terms of it got more complicated towards the end because it became more of a slight kind of area control, and you were thinking at the time that you are racing along the tracks to increase the number of victory points. It was one of these games that you looked at it and went, this is simple. By the end, everybody's kind of getting angry with each other because they're kind of like, well, if you put that there, I can't put this there. I need to do this. I need to open up this lane here. So the overall, we really enjoyed it in the group. We played 4 players.
That's what I was just about to ask you. So yeah, I mean, one of the things I like most about Endeavour Age of Sail is that as games go, it kind of teaches you how to play it. Because the first 2 turns are micro turns. And I remember the first time I actually played it, I kind of had to say to myself, that's it? And I wondered where the game was. But then, yes, very much to your point, once you get to rounds 5, 6, and 7, the depth that's there becomes very apparent, and it's just a magnificent and elegant experience. Now, how many of you was it your first time playing?
It was all of ours, because the person that had it, I don't think they had it. They actually had the game that long. I think this was the first time they aired it. So there was nobody that had played the game before. In fact, Justin, who had played the game, had only really ran through it by himself to get himself ready for the rules. So everybody was kind of playing it for the first time. So in terms of kind of setup, love the game trays. The game trays.
Oh, yeah, they're beautiful, right?
Oh, just, this is really strange. But yeah, I mean, we kind of walked away from it. I kind of got, it kind of reminded me in terms of, no, it didn't remind me, but in terms of how easy it was to play, and then the complication kind of set in earlier on was kind of Root, which is another game I've absolutely adored recently, where the basic kind of mechanics are there, and you can understand the mechanics really, really easily and really, really quickly. But it's like when you get into the further rounds, I was thinking, it's interesting with Endeavour because there's tracks, but not every space on the track gets you victory points. So you're getting to the end where you're moving up. Obviously, you're moving up from like being able to build buildings with 3 bricks or 4 bricks, but then there's like one space that's got the victory point and the next 2 don't. So it was almost a case at the end when we're sacrificing cards and realising we're having to move back down the track. It was like, well, I don't have to worry about sacrificing this card because I'm not losing any victory points. But there was one point where I was about to move into 3-7 victory point scoring bits.
Okay.
So if I get into one particular bit, and that kind of moved me up from being kind of very far behind to being, pretty decent in terms of kind of the order which we finished off. But yeah, it was a pleasant surprise. I think we really enjoyed it in terms of how it played and how quick it played, and we managed to get it all kind of finished within maybe it must have been about an hour and a half, maybe an hour 20. So it didn't overstay its welcome,
No, and I think you'll find future experiences to be, much, much faster, quite frankly, now that you can get a rhythm down. Did you guys play with the exploits, or did you leave those out as it was your first game?
I think we left them out. Yeah, we just played with the main kind of base stuff. We didn't add in anything over and above. Yeah. So we didn't want it because it was, I think it's different with, you've got maybe even if there's 2 that's played before, and the 2 can carry the other 2 people to kind of help explain what they're meant to be doing. But we kind of left it kind of on the base stuff. That's not to say that we're not going to kind of bring them in kind of on another game. But
right. Yeah, I think that's definitely the way to go. I think that's a good decision to leave them out of your first play. I just, anyway, yeah.
No. It's something that's important to me is that I can get a game to the table and I can play a game. I can set up a game and start kind of playing it and almost learn to play the game as I go, and not be penalised for not knowing everything that's kind of going on, that you're kind of learning, so everything's kind of building up. So even if you didn't understand what was as you said, happening in the first 3 or 4 turns, by the time you got into the real meat of the game, you were well enough educated so you know what you were meant to be doing kind of going forward. So you didn't lose anything if you weren't sure how to be planning kind of going forward. Right. And that's kind of attractive to me.
Yep. And I think you'll find, sorry, I'm a terrible interrupter. And I think you'll find on future plays now that even though those first rounds are simple, you'll look at the board in a new way and begin to be able to strategize from the get-go and say to yourself, oh, I really want to get up that track. And, anyway, yeah. So I'm glad you enjoyed it so much.
No, it was good. It was strange because we didn't open up the last kind of territories until probably towards the end. I think the last one's kind of like South America was like one of the last ones to open. Same with I think Africa as well. Just because at the beginning we weren't sure what we were doing, and then somebody dominated one of the corner pieces. They just had their guys all down, and they were just getting card after card after card, and they just they scored. But yeah, it's a good game. I had no idea you were involved in That's a very happenstance, I think you call it.
Yeah, that's really funny. No worries.
That's pretty cool. But yeah, I mean, why go down the creative path? I mean, you seem to have things kind of going quite well with it, the demo team, and you've got your GM kind of going. I mean, was there a drive for you to kind of push yourself kind of a bit further kind of creatively? Is that what you were looking at doing?
So yeah, let me speak to another sort of part of my gaming history. So It was around 2013. So let me change how I'm saying this. No convention is perfect. And even though my Origins was my first big convention, and I love going to Origins, there's always problems, right? Who knows what? And I said to myself, well, if I have a problem with something, why don't I try to fix it? And, my version of fixing it was to start a convention. So that's what I actually did. And in 2013, after about a year and a half of planning, I co-founded a convention here in Grand Rapids, Michigan. Now, I'm no longer involved with that convention, but the reason in part why is because I was involved with that convention for 4 years. And then around year 3 of those 4 years, I started getting the publishing bug. I just basically thought it would be fun. I had supported some Kickstarters. I, saw all these great games coming out, and I said, well, heck, I can do this too. And what's funny is at the time I went to my business partner and I actually had a plan that the publishing should be a part of the convention, because I thought to myself, wouldn't it be cool if, as a convention owner that you're going to get, let's use nice, easy numbers. You're going to get 1,000 people to walk through the door. Yeah. So if you're going to publish a small game, why not build that game into your pricing model? And instead of charging $30 to get through the door, why not charge $40 to get through the door? And everyone gets a free game. And that would cover and again, this is all naivety. This was what I was thinking way back when, but perspective changes everything. So I said, that sounds like a pretty cool idea to me. And I went to my business partner and I said, hey, what do you think of this idea? And he said something to me like, well, I know enough about publishing to know that I really don't want to get into it. But if you want to do it, then, hey, go to town, man. And so I basically said, okay, I'm going to give this a shot. And setting aside that story, simultaneous to that, I'm a big podcast listener. I listen to so many shows that I'm literally probably a month behind, and I desperately struggle to catch up and stay current. But one of the shows I listen to is called Building the Game, and it is co-hosted by Jason Slingerland and Rob Couch. Yeah. And I listen to that show from the beginning, both because I enjoy the content, but also because Jason and Rob are local. And so basically they call themselves a documentary podcast, and the podcast is about their adventures or misadventures in board game publishing. Board game designing, and with the goal to get published. And Jason was telling a story about a game that he had designed that had been picked up and then let go by 2 different publishers, which of course, it's super exciting to get picked up, and it's super frustrating to get, let go, because you think you're on the path and then all of a sudden you're not. And they had their reasons. And just to clarify, none of those had to do with the quality of the game itself. And I remember I was driving in my car, listening to him tell the story of the second publisher backing out. And I literally paused my podcast, picked up my phone, and said, Jason, I want to publish your game. And about a year later, we had a published game in Unreal Estate. Now, the game he was telling the story about is not the game that ended up being Unreal Estate, but and as far as I know, that design, which at the time went by the name Gunslingin' Wranglers, I think it is still probably, if memory serves, I think it's still on a shelf. I'm not sure that Jason has progressed with the design, but who knows? But so that's where Unreal Estate came from. It was just sort of this, I don't know, I do something and then I take the next step and then I take the next step. And, instead of just attending Origins as an attendee, now I attended as a publisher, and here I am. But you made an interesting comment before about the name of the company and a guild, and it sort of feeling in name like a collection of companies. Well, again, I come back to the statement that perspective is everything, and this is a much, much harder thing to do than I ever would have imagined. And eventually, one day, maybe, fingers crossed, I could see a situation where instead of being a publishing company, I am a company that has publishing studios, maybe the poor man's Asmodee or something like that. But for right now, I'm just me, just trying to crank out one game at a time and, seeing if we can stick to the deadlines we set and keep them going. And actually, to be fair, to say I'm a one-man show is not accurate at all. My creative pillar of strength is Josh Capel. He is my lead developer, my art director, and my sometimes artist. So his contribution to my process is tremendous, and there is no way that I do it all myself.
No, I mean it's almost like you've got to be a one man army on some Kickstarter projects. I mean, I've spoken about this quite recently about with a number of people, including kind of MMA from Emmer Studios, about all of a sudden being thrust into a person that's got to become like a Swiss Army knife, and still having to make sure you kind of take care of the self-care kind of portion of it as well. You've discovered you've got to be kind of like a multi-task type of thing. And sometimes it's difficult to, I guess, to kind of stick a hand up and say, actually, can I get some help from some people, rather than kind of do it all yourself, really. You went ahead, and obviously, Unreal Estate was the first one, but then you went into Pocket Ops.
Yep.
Which again, I mean, it was, very, very well received. I mean, that was, like funded, that funded like almost over a year ago now. You had set yourself kind of like I would say a modest target of about $5,000, and you kind of romped in to the tune of almost over $24,000 on there. Seemed to be a completely different game from Unreal Estate. I mean, at that time, when was that something you came up with at the time? Was that something you came up with the team, or was that another project that you'd seen kind of kicking about that you wanted to get your hands on? Or I mean, how did that kind of come about?
So Pocket Ops came about because there is an organization in the gaming world called Protospiel that runs satellite events at least all over the United States. I'm not sure if there are international Protospiels, but I attended Protospiel Chelsea back in, I think it was July of 2016. And long story short, what's kind of funny, someone pointed out to me, because I didn't actually realize this myself, that after Unreal Estate and Stroop, the 3 next games that I will end up publishing all came from that visit to Protospiel. So it was originally intended that Endangered by Joe Hopkins was going to be published first, and then Pocket Ops, and then the Artemis Project, which was actually called Colonies of Venus at that time. What ended up happening was that Pocket Ops was a small project that I felt I could bang out, so we did that first. And then Endangered was supposed to be next, but we had a slowdown on the art, and there is a lot of art in that game. And so we just rejiggered the schedule and put Artemis Project first, and then Endangered is actually going to hit Kickstarter early next year. So, but actually, you know what? I feel kind of dumb. I'm not sure if I actually answered your question or what. But yeah, you can ask me again.
There's no wrong answers to any of the questions, because I don't always ask clever questions. I'm not like, I would never ever claim to be kind of like the.
You're not Barbara Walters or Diane Sawyer.
I'm more like Joan Rivers. There you go. More like makeup. Where the hell is makeup?
Your red carpet.
Exactly. It's interesting that you renamed the Artemis Project. Was that anything to do with the kind of the behemoth that was kind of terraforming Mars?
Sort of. So obviously, and I don't want to put words in the designers' mouths, but when I engaged with Colonies of Venus, to me, that title suggests a retro sci-fi thing, the kind of fiction that was put into print and on film in the 60s, imagining what the millennium would be like.
Yeah.
So that was sort of, when I hear Colonies of Venus, that's the image that I get. So simultaneous to that is the situation with Terraforming Mars, which is a fantastic game and obviously put out Venus Next. And there was at least one other Venus titled game that I think landed on my radar at the time. And the industry, going in waves is not the right word, but I think there's a zeitgeist at times where multiple thematically similar concepts end up coming out at the same time. And I talked to the team, the designers, and to Josh, and basically said, okay, I think we need to go a little bit further into the solar system. We can either look at the real solar system, or we can, make something up on our own. And we decided that looking at real science actually made more sense. And through a little bit of Googling and Wikipedia-ing, we actually came upon the Artemis Project, which was a real thing. And if you know your mythology and you know the solar system, you know that, many of the planetary bodies are named for mythological gods and goddesses. Yeah. Obviously, Artemis is the name of our moon. And so the Artemis Project was actually a scientific body that looked at how realistic it was to colonize our own moon. As a part of that project, they also engaged the idea of colonizing Europa, because Europa as a planetary body has an icy crust and an ocean beneath it. So it is considered to be a high on the flagpole for a place that might contain life. So it was sort of a joint reality with a tiny bit of creative license, because even though the Artemis Project was focused on our moon, it did look at Europa, and that's where we got it from. We we felt like it rolled off the tongue. We felt that it sounded intriguing. We felt that it sounded not like retro sci-fi, but more far-flung sci-fi, and there we are.
I mean, I am a massive fan of kind of dice placement, dice engine type games.
Sure,
I mean,
me as well.
Steampunk Rally, kind of really, really loved that. Anything that kind of screams at me, where you can use dice, you can build an engine, you can use that to build other stuff, is always kind of good fun. I didn't get on with Terraforming Mars. I have gone to great lengths on social media to kind of air my frustrations about kind of Terraforming Mars and why I didn't go on with it. And that is a whole podcast in itself for another time. And there's actually people that went to Tabletop Scotland will witness me doing a 5-minute rant on Terraforming Mars. And I don't want to go into it because Stronghold Games did actually start following me on Twitter the other day, and I don't want to turn around and say I don't like.
Well, and let me tell you something, if I may. We're in an industry full of amazing people, and Stephen Bonacore is one of those amazing people. I am very fortunate to call Stephen a friend, and that man. I don't know all the inner workings of Stronghold Games. I've been, I'd say, maybe one step closer to the inner circle than your average fan, just because Stronghold is one of the companies that we demo for as part of Grand Gaming Academy, and also. One of the companies that I look to figure out who I want to be in this industry. But, Stephen has spent darn near a decade busting his tail. And, whether you like Terraforming Mars or not as a game, I mean, I've only played it once, to be honest. But, I am so happy for his success. It gives me no end of joy to see that he is finally getting his moment in the sun, and that all that hard work is bearing dividends, not just because I am so happy for him personally, but because it shows that with hard work and elbow grease and dedication and stick-to-itiveness, that you can bust out. Someone said, I think it was Mike Fitzgerald, who said, every company is just one title away from being a big company. And, Stephen was well on his way to being a big company without Terraforming Mars, but it's almost as if he got into a catapult and launched himself because, that is just amazing for him. So anyway, that's my Bonacor Stronghold soapbox speech for anyone who cares to hear it.
We'll put a marker in the notes so that people can fast forward it. But this, it's doing well. When you launched it, because it was a little bit of a bigger risk than the previous games that you put on Kickstarter. Because
no doubt.
Let's face it, the funding total was $25,000, $25,000. Obviously you're sitting pretty because you've got 60,000. But was that something at the kind of the back of your mind? I brought this up with a few kind of creators, and the fact that this whole fund in the first 24 hours kind of thing that seems to be going about in Kickstarter at the moment. Were you tempted at the time to put a kind of a lower kind of target to try and make sure that the funding was hit? Or were you like, no, this is going to happen, stick with the 25k, and let's, I'm very, very confident this is going to do kind of very well?
Sure. So you've actually asked quite a bit there, and I'll try to unpack it in a way that makes sense. Mm-hmm. So from the very beginning, it has always been my intention only ever to ask for what I actually need. And the driving philosophy behind my Kickstarter projects, all three of them, has been that I come to the table, again, asking only for what I need, but with the knowledge that I am putting up a substantial stake of my own money to bring this to fruition. That is to say, on Pocket Ops and on real estate, I asked for $5,000.
Yeah.
And I had $5,000 of my own, at least, in the bank to match what my backers were going to give me, because I didn't feel it was appropriate to ask them for more than I was giving myself. Okay. But as many people have come to realize, the board game industry, you don't put a project up on Kickstarter and suddenly find yourself rolling around in a vat of gold like Scrooge McDuck. The truth of the matter is that even after doing two projects that by all measures are very successful for what they are, there was not extra money left over. There was not a giant investment left in my bank account that I could move forward into Artemis Project or any other game. And so when I was building the Artemis Project as a project, I have some goals for myself. One, I want to put out a game that, forgetting game quality, because that's kind of a given. I want a game that's fun to play. Everyone wants that. But from a aesthetic and a tactile standpoint, I want to put out a game that I genuinely want to play. A game that is fun to move the bits around. A game that satisfies visually. We've all played prototypes. You can have a fun experience, but handling note cards and loose leaf paper is not satisfying. It is definitely lacking. And that's why games, evolve into the elaborate products that they are. So I actually toyed with a number of funding levels, all the way from $40,000 at the top end down to $25,000, which is obviously where we settled. I had a lot of conversations with friends and mentors in the industry who had run multiple Kickstarters, and talked about that first day funding mentality, talked about the audience that I had built over time with Unreal Estate and Pocket Ops and Endeavour Age of Sail, talked about the game that I wanted to put out and what was a minimum acceptable print run, so as to be, realistic, but also not overly costly, and what was minimally acceptable in terms of the components that I was going to put into the box when all was said and done. And what did it mean if I only hit $25,000? And so add into that, as you had stated before, that my previous projects were small projects. They were games that, I don't want to say they were games that were targeted toward a particular audience. I think there is a subset of the gaming audience that gravitates towards small games and excludes big games. I also think there's a subset of the audience that gravitates towards big games and excludes small games. And here I was asking my small game audience to come with me, saying to them, hey, you've had faith in me before. Follow me on this project, please. and I did not know if they were going to come. And even so, I've not, looked at every backer's name and seen who's crossed over from Unreal Estate and Pocket Ops to the Artemis Project. But did I know it was going to fund? Not even close. Did I have faith and hope and, let's say, a reasonable optimistic certainty that it was going to fund? I would be a liar if I said no. I mean, I'd run 3 projects. Between the 3 of them, we had 1,200, and 7,500 backers. I'd done the math. I had, I don't want to call it an expectation, but a very positive hope on what could come to fruition. And I'm very fortunate that it did, and that we were able to keep on chugging along. And here we are, still with 10 days to go. We cracked another major milestone today, which was fantastic. And actually yesterday, as of the time that we're recording this, yesterday we actually had the best, one of the best days of our campaign. And that's in what, is the middle of the traditional lull, which, funny enough, is part of what I spent my day writing tomorrow's email about.
But that's a good thing to be, though, is to be in that positive place where you can actually say, hey guys, we're continuing to kind of to storm this. I mean, there's a lot of people talking about
I know
the Artemis Project. There's a lot of people talking about, there's a lot, wherever I go on Facebook, amongst the groups on Twitter, I'm always seeing, have you seen this? Have you seen this game? And it's kind of, I mean, there wasn't a quote, I guess, when we were first started talking to arrange this, it was like, well, what game is it? And it was like, well, it's the Artemis Project. It's like, whenever.
Mm-hmm.
Where do you want to talk? Oh, I can talk here. Yeah, let's just talk. That's fine. Let's find a space and let's have a conversation on it, which was good. But there seems to be a kind of a positive buzz. It's funding. You've got kind of like the projects kind of behind you. For people who haven't heard and who have been living under rocks, rolling rocks, and have stayed away from Kickstarter because it's an expensive business backing on Kickstarter nowadays, what can they expect from the Artemis Project? What's the kind of the elevator pitch? What would you,
Sure.
If somebody says, tell me about the Artemis Project, what are you going to say to them, Mark?
Sure. So the Artemis Project is a story of colonizing Europa, both above and below the ice. Over the course of 6 rounds, you're going to roll the dice, you're going to place them, and you're going to resolve them, and the dice are going to resolve in a different way depending on where you put them on the board. We have some key mechanics with the dice placement. You're doing a little bit of engine building, a little bit of set collection, and one of the and reviewers time and again have pulled this out, and it was intended. We have a mechanism called the exposure mechanism. One of the driving things that Daniel and Daryl did when they put together the mechanics for the Artemis Project is they said, how can we make a game where every die matters, where it's not the low numbers and it's especially not the high numbers, but every die is going to influence the board in a way that is impactful. And it came to be called the exposure mechanism, and I've referred to it as dice displacement, but it is very much a situation where in a substantial part of the board, lower dice actually supersede high dice. So you are constantly looking at what the other players have rolled and making a move to what you need to get, not just based on what you need, but based on what they have showing, what their next move could be, and the moves that they've already done. Because just because you want a resource in a particular amount doesn't mean you're going to get that resource in that amount.
No,
so that was probably a little bit more than an elevator pitch, but I apologize.
That's fine.
Got the best.
No, that's good. No, we're going up to penthouse levels, so it was going to be
very good.
Journey. I think people want to know what is kind of happening. Yeah, I guess one of the I've recorded an episode quite recently, which is going to be about a dice, a combat dice game where you actually throw dice at other dice.
Oh wow.
Called Masters of Ketdown, and that should be potentially out there by the time people are listening to this episode as well. But the point I kind of bring up in that episode is that the only issue I've ever had with dice placement games is you roll them and then that's it. Kind of nothing happens. You kind of play about with what it is. And one of my things that always frustrated me in something like Steampunk Rally was that you were always looking for the higher numbers because the higher numbers gave you more opportunity, and the lower numbers were fine if you're wanting to clear out certain areas, kind of thing. But that was, but the idea of you saying, well, the lower numbers matter here because you can actually twist them around to kind of do more things is very, very kind of interesting to me. Is it strange doing a kind of a big box game with regards to production? You got like lots more things to kind of be looking at, to taking into consideration in terms of, once it's going to get funded, it's going to be going out there, you're going to be then having discussions with like manufacturers and the printing side of things, the logistics side of things. Is this a slightly different kind of ball game than what you were used to with, say, Pocket Ops, for instance? Or
Oh, definitely. I mean, the whole point, I know mistakes are going to be made, and I try to approach things carefully and systematically, but you can plan as much as you want, and life is still going to throw you a curveball. One of the reasons why I started with small projects is because small projects mean small screw-ups. Big projects mean big screw-ups, and I didn't want to give myself the opportunity to screw up big until I had given myself the opportunity to screw up small and learn from it. And so, that's why I started with small projects. Other people have started with gigantic projects and done just fine. I was not in a place where I wanted to take that chance. So, but yes, you better believe it. It's a whole different ball game. A lot more moving parts. When you knock over one domino, it influences a lot more dominoes in a big game than in a small game. And so you just need to be very systematic and very careful. And even doing that, I guarantee you, some mistake, some unintentional error will creep into the final production. But you look at it, you make a note on it, you learn from it, and hopefully you do better next time. We won't be the first large box Kickstarter that has some sort of a flaw. Hopefully it's not a fatal flaw.
Yeah. Well, I was hearing that about, going back to Endeavour. The guy that owns it was saying, he was on the comments and people had complained about, he says he did notice like on a tiny speck on one of the boards. And he says, then we're complaining about it, or that, I think it was something like one of the counters, they were experiencing some of the paint had come off on some of them because they'd been put away maybe a bit too early. And he says, and people were flipping their, losing their minds over it, basically, because one or two counters had a couple of little missing bits of purple paint. And he was like, you can solve that with a brush and a bit of purple paint. It's a terrible, frustrating thing. However, it is a little bit of wood and it's not the end of the world kind of thing. But people get very, very passionate in kind of Kickstarter comments, as I'm sure you're more than aware, Mark.
Yeah, they do. It's a bit of a mixed bag because, you want to... Look, people are putting up their money. They took a big chance on Endeavour and on Burnt Island Games and on Grand Gamers Guild. And we absolutely want to give them the product that they paid for.
Yeah.
The issues are enough that we are definitely addressing it on a manufacturer level. And we're going to make good with every customer, every backer in every way we can. And that's the best I could say at the moment because it's kind of still in process. We're having that conversation with the manufacturer, and we're in the process of putting together an inventory of everyone who's having an issue, and we will make good as soon as it's practically possible to do so.
Yeah, it was interesting that the person who owns Endeavour is actually a game designer themselves. They were just so they were very, very forgiving. They weren't kind of ranting about the game. They were kind of like, well, come on, it's a bit of wood kind of thing.
Right.
So they were very, 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 very forgiving about kind of like, they understand the manufacturing process. So they're more than aware of the kind of the potential things, the slips and the slides that kind of happen over the way. Which is
the other thing I'll say is it's really easy to get very excited and let the internet be a very solid shield. No one can hurt you from the other side of your screen. And so the comments get incendiary And of course, I think we as human beings read online stuff in about the most negative way possible. I'm 99% certain that if I sat down with any one of these guys or gals across a gaming table, we could roll the dice and have a pint and have a great time together. So,
absolutely.
It's tough not to take things to heart when the barrage of complaints begins to stack up, but you gotta, breathe, know that you're doing the best you can, and just keep on keeping on. And,
exactly.
Once these people see us making good for them, they'll chill. It'll happen. It's okay.
Yeah.
We'll all have a great time together.
So, I mean, with where you are with the Artemis Project, has this opened up your scope for the types of games you're going to consider for the future? I mean, are you
Absolutely.
now saying, well, big box is, we've now got a decent number of backers here. We've got our backers from our previous projects. Is that kind of opened up your scope to say, well, actually, that guy that we maybe thought was going to be a bit too big of a project, let's contact them and maybe bring them in because it was a really, really interesting idea kind of thing?
Definitely. So one of the driving philosophies of the way I want to publish, and has been since the beginning, is I have this hashtag that I sometimes use that's Game Night Go To. And my goal as a company is to cast a wide net. I want to be a company that you can pull, if you're having a 6-hour game night, I want you to be able to pull 3 to 4 of my games off of your shelf, from your opener to your main course to your finisher, and have a varied experience. And like I said, be the game night go-to. Be the company that you could spend the entire night playing the games and go, man, I can't believe the same person published all these, or the same company published all these. So to answer your actual question, the answer is yes. I mean, our next game, Endangered, is a co-op game about saving endangered species. It's scenario based, and it has 2 scenarios in the box initially: tigers and sea otters. So we've not done a co-op before. The game after that, called Garinto, is an abstract tile drafting and engine building game with sort of an Asian philosophical elemental type of theme. And our game after that, Lost Vegas, is a post-apocalyptic game with the story of, Vegas, let's say 100 years into the future, that's been taken over by the desert, and your goal is to recover it. So, I mean, I don't think any one of those games, either mechanically or thematically, sounds like anything we've done. And if I can, eventually we'll run out, I'm sure. But, if I can continue to publish games that do, maybe not new things in the industry. Granted, I'll fully admit that I think most people look at the dice exposure mechanic as a new thing among the spectrum of dice placement. But if I can continue to do new things that expand my catalog, again, from both the storytelling as well as the mechanical perspective, and that resonates with the audience, then I will be a very happy publisher for a good long time.
Well, can't wish for much more than that, can you, really?
Nope. I've been unhappy doing work. I don't want to be unhappy anymore. We started the conversation with that. So,
Well, I do have one more question for you.
Fire away.
You have been chosen as one of a member of the crew who's actually going to go and colonize Europa, okay?
Mm-hmm.
It's going to be a long journey. So the head of the team says, I'll tell you what you can do, Mark. He says, basically, I am going to allow you to take any 3 board games you want with you on the mission. There'll be a lot of time, so we're going to have a lot of time to play whatever you want. And also, there's a crew of 8 going on this mission, so you're going to have plenty of people to take with you. Now, the director of operations has managed to pull a blinder because obviously they've got government connections, so they can get their hands on any single game at all, be it a first edition, second edition, out of print edition, they'll get it reprinted for you. What 3 games do you take with you on your journey, sir?
Wow, that is an amazing question. Okay, so I think the first game I would have to take with me would be Power Grid. And
Okay.
to be fair, this Power Grid was mentioned both in a recent episode of Heavy Cardboard, as well as someone put up a thread about Power Grid. So it's very close to the front of my mind. But for a game that was done back in 2004, Power Grid is an amazing game. I mean, also I should say, as long as I get to bring all the expansion maps and expansion content.
Oh yeah,
So,
absolutely.
So if we could tuck that under this conversation, then yes, I stick with Power Grid.
Okay. And the second game?
Okay, so I'm going to continue cheating a little bit and saying that the expansions can come with. So I want to bring Ticket to Ride and all of its expansions and maps and things like that.
Yeah.
Because that would be no end of gameplay. So I think I've thoroughly cheated on 2 out of 3 of these.
And the third one, you might as well keep it up.
All right, well, if you're going to allow me to continue cheating, then I will bring the game that actually... It was the very first game that I ever saw and sort of bought into the hype on, and that is Small World. The box cover and the story that they were trying to tell in Small World just sank its claws into me. And I can't remember what year it came out, but I remember the year that I went to Origins, I made sure to sit down and play that game. I had an agenda and I was a man on a mission. And Small World, again, has a ton of expansions. I love the way it plays in terms of the mix and match of the powers and the races. And, I mean, you just have, between those 3 games and all their expansions, they're all very different. They're all telling different stories. And, mechanically, I don't think they could be more dissimilar. So... So there you go. Those are my 3. If I could tuck those 3 games under my seat, maybe in some kind of a,
there's proper storage, Mark. Oh no, there's proper
all right.
storage. Oh, these things are getting their own little isolation chamber and stuff like that. There's going to be no moisture happening in that. They're going to be well looked after. You got to keep the crew happy if they're going to be doing a little bit of, if they're going to be doing a little bit of a shake and bake kind of colony. That's fine. Thank you very, very much for coming on. I know we haven't kind of done our usual. We kind of like talked about everything about the game, except we did the game for about 5 minutes. But I'm sure, as I say, the Artemis Project is there's a lot of talk about it. There's a lot of buzz about it. People are very, very interested in kind of finding out more about it. And there'll be a lot of people that will be very excited when they finally get their hands on a copy. If they want to keep an eye on what you get up to, where can we find you on the interweb nets, Mr. Specter, sir?
Okay, so the website is grandgamersguild.com, and you can look at everything we have going on there. If you want to receive my email ramblings on an almost weekly basis, you can also sign up for our email newsletter. We don't... I'm usually pretty good about weekly. In fact, that's my kind of my discipline right now. I've been pretty good about it. Other than that, we're on Facebook. You can either search, you can just search Grand Gamers Guild on Facebook. And my company logo of the hooded lady is pretty remarkable. I love it. I get a lot of compliments on it. So I think it's pretty iconic, and you'll recognize it if you look the company up. On Twitter, we are at Grand Gamers Guild. With no vowels. So spell it out and then pluck out all the vowels and you'll find me on there. And that's also the same at Grand Gamers Guild on Instagram as well, where we're not nearly as active, but I'm doing my best to try to step up. So yeah.
Excellent. Well, what we'll do is we shall make sure that all those links go in the show notes so that we have notes to show. If you want to keep an eye on what we're up to, then you can go to the internet and you can search for us, or you can find us. If you go to Twitter, we're on We're Not Wizards. We are on Facebook at We're Not Wizards. We are on Instagram at We're Not Wizards. For some reason, we're on Tumblr at We're Not Wizards. We got our website, which is we'renotwizards.com. We have got our blog where we write about games and such, and other people write about games and stuff as well. So, go there and check out what these other people are writing about, which is we'renotwizards.blogspot.com. You can email us, which is magic@we'renotwizards.com. Yes, I am aware of the irony of the email address. Yes, I decided it. And you can find us on all the various different kind of podcast catchers like Stitcher and Spreaker and Acast and Spotify. Yeah, we're on Spotify as well. If you like what you've heard tonight, and Mark's been a fantastic guest, please jump on to Apple Podcasts and drop us a subscription, because it makes everybody happy. Well, it makes me happy. It's just me, nobody else. And if you like us even more, consider giving us a rating or a review. If you are going to be giving us a rating or a review, vitally important bit of information coming up. Remember, don't give us 10 stars, because it makes us big-headed. But don't give us 1, because it makes us cry. And I am not an attractive crier. You know, I'm just not good. Give us something in the middle, like a 5, because it's average, and we're just a little bit average. But the person who's not been average tonight is rather wonderful, rather fantastic, and Mr. Marc Specter.
Thank you for having me.
Very much. No, it's been an absolute pleasure. There are only 2 more things to do. The first thing is to remember that we are many things, but we're not wizards. Are we wizards, Mark?
No, definitely not.
Absolutely not. Thank you very much, sir. And the second thing, the dog is, though. Oh, look, the dog's not happy.
No, he just decided to speak up. That's kind of funny for the at the end of the interview here.
And the second thing is say goodbye. So it's a goodbye from Mark. So say goodbye, Mark.
See you later, everybody.
And it's a goodbye from me. Remember, stay safe, roll6s.com. And if you're into your dice, if you're into your dice placement, if you're into your resource management, if you're into looking at exciting, beautiful, colourful looking projects and something that's creating a buzz or a hype, and you're after your next Kickstarter project, then make sure you check out the Artemis Project. But until the next time, goodbye.